quote that CA means charismatic amalgamation, experience of life. Mr. Karthik Chandrasekhar is a chartered accountant with 14 years of experience in various levels of accountancy and auditing. Mr. Karthik is specialized in the preparation of financial statements, coordination with statutory and internal auditors, setting up of internal financial controls on financial reporting. A professional who is virtuous in carrying out statutory audits of various sectors such as telecom, cement, leisure, construction, petrochemicals, both publicly listed and closely held private entities. A span of 14 years, he did work in various accounts of accountancy in corporates like Happiest Mind Technologies, Deloitte, Huskinson and Sells, and currently Mr. Karthik is with Zynga Incorporation as Senior Manager Accounting. To add to his credentials, he holds a diploma in Education Technology, International Financial Reporting, and ACCA. On behalf of SKASC, we welcome you, sir, for this conference, Industry 5.0, Education Sector, on the topic, Impact of Financial Performance of the Companies Due to Pandemic, an Employee and Employer Perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. A flower does not think of competing with the flower next to it. It just blooms. Now I request our principal, sir, to do the honor of presenting the guest speaker with a bouquet and a memento. Okay, sir. I now request Dr. Maria Williams, Dean, to do the honors of presenting the guest speaker with the bouquet and a memento. Thank you, ma'am. Pandemic has put students as well as professionals in a serious jeopardy of future education and financial performance. To create an impact on the audience, with us detailing on the impact on financial performance of the companies due to pandemic, an employee and employer perspective, let's welcome CA Mr. Karthik Chandrasekhar, Senior Manager, Zynga, Chennai.
A very good afternoon to one and all present here. So I will not bore much with too much of numbers because you guys will be dealing with numbers on a day-to-day basis in your college. So let us see some aspects which you might, it's financial and non-financial basically, because if I put out numbers on charts and PPT, again you guys will go back to sleep. So let us keep it simple and learn about how pandemic, because you guys are students, you might not have actually felt it from an employee perspective, but you are going to be future employees of companies. So how the way forward it will happen and what impacted, you might have seen your parents or your elder brothers or elder sisters go through these things. So let us see how, let us take a rewind and then see what impacted. PDF photo. So if you see the brief contents, just kind of put up the content. Okay. So we'll see the initial contents. If you see, we'll see the initial impact of the pandemic as how it raged out. If you go back to March 2020, when some of you might still be in class 12, some of you might have gone through a first year of college, you might see that the implementation of the lockdown happened in March 2020, wherein the government implemented the lockdown and all the sectors, there was no sector which was not affected. So if you see some of the sectors which are most affected, like aviation, transportation, your consumer durables, that is people who regularly go and shop like for your ACs, your washing machines, your refrigerations, all those sectors were affected, including FMCG, that is your fast moving consumer goods, that is your day-to-day staples which you buy, rations and all that stuff. All that became a demand. That is what you thought would be available regularly. You can go walk into a shop and buy those stuff. You are not able to buy, or you want to travel from place A to place B, you will not be able to move because of the lockdown. So these sectors were the most impacted because of the pandemic. And then if you come down, some of the sectors which benefited out of the pandemic is like oil and gas. If you remember, the petrol prices came down in March 2020 and April 2020. It came down drastically to around $10 per barrel, which was unheard of in the last 50, 60 years of oil price movement. That is when you might realize that government reduced the price of the petrol on one hand and increased the taxes to, in fact, fund the pandemic healthcare spend. So that was one of the few sectors which got impacted on a positive way. And the another sector which impacted in a positive way was your telecommunication and media sector. I'm sure all the theater-going folks here would have missed going to the theaters in the last 2 years. But then all the subscriptions into OTT increased. That is when people started moving from theaters to the OTT medium, wherein you started subscribing for 600 rupees, you subscribe to an OTT platform and you can see all the movies, rather than spend 2,000 or 3,000 bucks on going to a movie with popcorn and the parking charges also. And the biggest beneficiary of the pandemic during the initial lockdown or initial 1 year was the life sciences sector. Life sciences basically mean your pharma sector, because since it was an unknown virus which had hit all of us, the investment into life sciences, that is the pharma companies, to come out with a vaccine or come out with a medicine, that was also very much required. Hence, people had the companies were being investing in pharma, in the pharma companies for getting their vaccines and the medicines, in fact, in place. That is what impacted from an employer perspective. That is the companies. If you come back to the employee perspective, you might see the livelihood of and the jobs. That was the topmost priority for the folks. Because people, since it was an unknown virus and an unknown lockdown, people were in fact, the biggest worry was whether I'll have a job next day or not. So in fact, some of the folks here, I mean, not the students, but the academia here would have definitely had a hand in their mouth saying that, oh, whether I'll be having a job next because of the pandemic, how will the things span out? After that, the second priority became the pharma and essential commodities. Again, people who were regularly taking medicines, or if they're in fact affected by the virus, what essential medicines they need to take in order to come out of the impact of the virus, that became the second most priority. And then essential commodities. That is what you used to regularly go to your nearby provision store or nearby milk store and buy. That again became on a rational basis. That is, every time they had shops were open only for 1 or 2 hours, and then you had lot of rush, commotion, and then people started hoarding goods. That is, instead of buying 1 liter for their family, they used to buy 3-4 liters. I'm sure many of you would have done that also. And there are, other videos which mimicked how people were hoarding the goods during that point of time. And then the next priority which became for the employee perspective was the insurance. India is a very under-penetrated economy in terms of insurance. Other than what the employer provides as insurance to that employee, nobody has a standalone insurance policy. We all look down upon when somebody comes and offers us a medical insurance or a term life insurance. We say he's just working for a commission. But then during the pandemic is when people realized the importance of medical insurance, not only from what employer gives, but from an individual perspective, which we need to have. So again, the reverse migration happened at that point of time. If you see, when the lockdown was implemented, there was strict restriction on movement of people from place A to place B. You could not move easily without e-pass or without other obligations unless it is a medical emergency. So the reverse migration happened from cities to the tier 2 and the tier 3 towns. That is, people who are, if you're working in a company in Chennai or in Bangalore or in Bombay, you came back to your hometown in order to save on the rental cost, in order to save on the electricity cost, in order to save on your food expenses. So what happened? The reverse migration started happening and the cities became empty and the second tier and the third tier towns started gaining more prominence. Now we'll come to the damage assessment. Damage assessment in this, you will see what was the, once the pandemic hit us, what damages it caused from an employee and from an employer perspective. If you see here, there are a lot of closure of factories, especially Coimbatore being a manufacturing hub for automobile spare parts and cotton and textile industry. There were a lot of close down of factories. And because of reverse migration happening, there was non-availability of labor. On one hand, people were let go of their jobs. On the other hand, there were no people in the factories to produce the goods. So this led to an operational standstill. That is, even your colleges might not have been functioning at that point of time when the initial lockdown happened. So the transition was from a lockdown to how each industry coped up with the lockdown. And then the financial impact, if you see here, you will see the fixed cost overrun happening. What is meant by fixed cost overrun? That is, if, let's imagine, take an example of running this college or running this auditorium here. If the auditorium is still in place for the last 2 years, they still had to maintain it. If they had not maintained this auditorium for the last 2 years, we would not have been able to have a presentable condition here. So the maintenance cost of running a factory or running an establishment, that is what your fixed cost is. And that had to be incurred irrespective of whether the company is getting sales or the college is getting fees or not. So in order to fund that, they had to, there was fixed cost overrun. And then the strain on the capital, that is strain on capital in the finances means, even though there is no college fees or there is no revenue for a company, they still had to pay their salaries to the employees. Even though there were salary cuts which were announced, but the minimum salary which they need to pay, that was the obligation of the employer. And some employers, in fact, paid the full salary, some employers paid half the salary, some employers said, sorry, there is no job for you. So this is on the various levels of the impact. And then because of strain on the finances, the company's liquidity position, that is, if you are, to put it in very simple terms, if you are having 1,000 rupees of income per month and you need to spend almost 800 to 900 per month, by the end of the month, you are not left with not much money. And if there is no savings or bank balances in the company, the liquidity position again becomes very fragile. That is sustainability in the future. That is next month's salary, whether they'll be able to pay or not, became a question. And then there were supply chain constraints. Because of lockdown, what happened? Even though the company or the manufacturer had goods in his factory, there was no possibility to send the goods to the customer or the end user. Because of lockdown, the transport agencies and all had shut down. Again, reverse migration comes into question here. So the supply chain constraints for all the sector. In fact, the only sector which didn't have much supply chain constraint was your food delivery and your e-commerce apps, wherein they started innovating more because of these supply chain constraints. And then falling demand and inventory overhang. The falling demand is nothing but if you have, because of salary cuts and other economical fragility, there was no demand for goods. That is, people didn't want to travel at that point of time. People didn't want to buy refrigerators or buy ACs or buy even new mobile phones at that point of time. So what happened? Because of no sales of that, the inventory of the company, that is, they had produced goods in their factory or in their godowns, but they were unable to sell them. And then this is one of the few, the last one is contract obligations. That is, you would have seen during the pandemic or when the first wave of the pandemic hit and then few stores started opening up. If you visit a mall here in Coimbatore or in any of the bigger cities, you would see some of the biggest showrooms were closed down. Because all these malls run on a high rental basis, or even some of us, in fact, we would have moved houses from a high rental cost to a lower rental cost. That contract obligations are reducing your rental dependency of these fast-moving goods, basically your textile showrooms, your watch showrooms, your mobile phone showrooms. All those people started renegotiating the contracts with the mall owners or with the shop owners because sales was not happening. They had to, in fact, renegotiate the rentals and then say, I will come out of the rental agreement without paying any damages. So that is what is 4C measure, which is like considered as an act of nature. That is, if suddenly if an earthquake comes and then the shop goes down, they will not be able to pay rent. So they invoked those clauses in the agreement and then they were able to save on the rental costs. from an employee perspective, if you see, these are all these on the left side, what you see are from an employer perspective. Coming to an employee perspective, if you see, the loss of livelihood. I mean, many people here, especially in the manufacturing sector, from which the impact was more, lost their livelihood. And then that impacted their monthly income or daily income, in fact, daily wages also. So the essentials, what they were requiring, that the spend became very critical on the essentials. That is, pre-pandemic period, if you see, we would have been spending at least, if you go to a movie or a mall to a weekend, you'll be spending around 2,000 or 3,000 bucks. Or you want to go out with your friends for a vacation, you would have spent another 10,000, 15,000. But during the pandemic, we realized that what is an essential spend, what is a non-essential spend. That is, my essential spend is I need rice, food and my vegetables for my daily needs, I will spend on that. But going to movies or going to vacations is not an essential right now. The priorities again changed. And then there were salary cuts and deferrals also. That is, people who are due for an increment in April, May, June, or during that point of the year, there were no salary hikes given. In fact, there was a salary cut which was made. Most companies, this is where the real financial impact you will see. That is, companies had reduced sales, so they reduced their salary cost also. So what happened at that point of time was reduced salary cost, reduced sales. The loss which the company incurred was also reduced directly. So this is one of the biggest financial levers which the company used during the pandemic. That is the first phase, that is 2021, financial year 2021, between April 20 to December 20. That was when the first wave hit. Okay, and then the daily essentials availability. Again, government started taking measures to ensure that the milk shops are open at particular point of time, the ration shops are open at a particular point of time, the daily FMCG goods, that is your provision stores, are open. But then again, hoarding came into the picture here, and then that hoarding started easing only after September 2020 or December 2020. This talks about some of the changes which happened, or the companies, what changes they implemented to adapt to the new reality. That is, work from home culture. This WFH you would not have heard, or online classes. It was unheard of even in colleges or schools also. That is, they always required a physical presence for you to come, but because of the pandemic, they needed to accept the harsh reality that work from home or online classes is the only way out in order for the organization to survive, in order for the college to survive, and for students to survive also. So that became a focus. And then all organizations started rearranging what is an essential versus a non-essential spend. That is the Silver Jubilee celebrations also, if you see, if it was 2 years back during the pandemic, it would not, the company or management would not have spent on this. But then that was not an essential spend at that point of time. So now after 2 years, if they are doing it, it is an essential spend, because all that spend or the savings which were made during that period is now being realized in an efficient manner. And then the day-to-day operations. Companies or colleges also started reimagining day-to-day operations. That is, if you're coming into college, you need to wear a mask, you need to have your sanitization done, you need to get your self-tested for temperature and other stuff. This was pre-vaccine period, in fact. And then financially, all institutions resorted to salary cuts and then bonus reversals. In fact, Diwali of 2020 and 2021, not much people would have got bonuses because of your financial measures which the company had to resort to. And then this is one of the biggest thing, the loan moratoriums. That is, most of people who have taken a housing loan or a personal loan, the government in fact had given some moratorium. That is, you need not pay for the next 6 months, you can pay after the particular period. So this was also one of the biggest measures which the government had taken. And then technologically, companies started adopting to Zoom meetings. That is, if this conference were to be held online also, it would have been held. So that way companies started measuring more from an financially, they started saving more because of technology. They resorted to Zoom meetings. And then employees, because of working from home or even if you're online classes also, you would have seen the college had invested in getting an online mechanism for you to attend the classes. And similarly, companies also started resorting to remote working. That is, they spent more on IT infrastructure and the digital infrastructure. From an employee perspective, if you come back here, you will see a lower take-home salary and PF withdrawals. That is not, many people here would have been aware of PF withdrawal, provident fund, basically your monthly savings which goes into that. People started dipping into their gold reserves. Otherwise, if they had gold in their home sitting idle, they started pledging that and then taking money out of that. So people started dipping into their savings. And then again, as I said, the discretionary spend, for all your discretionary spend, what was necessary, what was not necessary. People even didn't start spending on dresses or their clothes. Only after the second wave or the third wave got over, the spend on the clothes or the other daily essentials started increasing. The follow-on effects, if you see, that is indirect effects which had financial impact on an employee, was your work from home setup or online classes. For attending online classes, most of you would have been using mobile phones. Some people would have started asking their parents for a laptop, get me a laptop, I need to attend the classes through the laptop. And then if they had kids, the employees had kids, their kids also had to attend online classes, apart from the them working for the office also. And then the loan deferrals also had an impact here, where people who had taken a loan, housing loan or a personal loan, they were also impacted here. And then the need for an alternative source of income. This is one of the biggest things which people started realizing is, apart from doing their daily work, they started doing the side hustle. That is, you go on social media, you start doing some reviews, and then you get from views, make money out of that. Or people started entering more into the stock markets. That is, after the pandemic closed, if you see the stock market users have grown exponentially, thanks to the alternative source of income which they were getting. And then this is the resurgence which happened. That is not the resurgence of the virus, but resurgence of the employee and the employer. That is, companies started adopting the new normal. The vaccines had come out by May 21, in fact, where it was available to all the general public. So that way, companies started coming back to normal, especially the manufacturing sectors. They were the biggest beneficiary because people were able to come to the factory. The reverse migration again stopped. And then people started coming back, and then the production cycle started again. So this led to a relook of the planning of the companies. That is, the last 1 year, whatever sales were down, the companies started reimagining how their operation should happen. So they started making changes into their day-to-day planning or their annual planning also. That is, let's see for the next 3 months. After that, we'll plan for the next 3 months, not planning in a full stretch financial year at one go. And then the hybrid model, that is people working from home, working from office, or working outside anywhere also. That is what a hybrid model is. That started gaining traction. And then the pent-up demand or the opening up of economy. This is one of the biggest beneficiaries which hit in 2021-22. That is, for the last 18 months, whatever money which was lying in the hands of the people, unspent, that is, you would not have spent on movies, you would not have spent on vacations, you would not have spent on your mobile phones. If you see, most of you would have got new clothes only after maybe July 21 or August 21 at that point of time. Wherein all the frustrated demand of not going out or not buying things basically started showing. And that impact, that money from the employees started going into the employer. That is, from people who had purchasing power, the money flowed into the company or into the economy, back into the economy, in fact. That was one of the biggest, that is what led to the rise in 21-22 profits. And then lower variable overhead. That is because the company started their operations on a very optimal way. The variable, the rental cost, the marketing cost, and then all that savings which were there led to their lower variable overheads. And then work from home allowance. Not many would have heard about this, but some companies, in fact, started giving employees work from home allowance to set up their home office. And also, in fact, for remote working. Basically, instead of coming to office, if the employee is coming to office, they'd have to spend on his seat. Seat incurs a cost. They'd have to spend on his food. They'd have to spend on his travel. They'll have to spend on his IT infrastructure. Instead of all that things, company said, I'll give you a work from home allowance. You set up the office at home, and you keep working from home itself. And then, because of the resurgence in the economy, the pay hike or the bonuses which were not given for the last 18 months, that started again coming back into the hands of the employees also. And then reimagine travel and marketing. The biggest savings which company had during the pandemic was on these two line items, travel and marketing costs. Because there was no physical travel which was happening during at that point of time. There was always savings on these aspects. So instead of spending on physical travel or physical marketing, they started resorting to social media marketing. That is when the full marketing tech which we saw earlier, that is where what got implemented here. That is, companies started going to social media platforms to advertise rather than going through a huge advertising agreement or with a superstar. Another after effects of this was the companies were better prepared in case of crisis management. Because of this pandemic, all the companies in fact had reimagined what crisis is and how they can respond to it. Instead of just having it as crisis management preparedness on a piece of paper, they actually realized what crisis management was and what shortcomings they had when they went through the pandemic. And then the operational cyber resilience. That is, because of the pandemic and online shift, the companies had to be very vigilant on their cyber activities. That is, hackers could come into the company and then they could hack into the system and then place a ransom on it. So their cyber security or their cyber resilience, that came into prominence. And then the supply chain integration. This, again, if you see in the first slide also I talked about this, the supply chain integration, especially in terms of e-commerce companies, wherein now everybody would have ordered something or the other through e-commerce websites. So those e-commerce websites, in fact, were one of the reasons which enabled all the companies. In fact, any company which had a physical store had to have an online presence also. Like traditional stores like even RMKV Silks or your Chennai's other traditional stores which always depended on physical stores, they started moving to online. You had even food, other than food, remote snacks or even clothes which are there from other countries, they started moving into online because they realized the next big market is through the online presence only. And then reskilling and employee welfare. The companies, the employees then realized that they need to reskill themselves. That is, working traditionally, okay, I'll work on whatever is taught in my college or whatever is taught in my syllabus. I'll learn that and then get into employment, but then they will not be able to sustain on that. So since digital upskilling is, technology is being adopted, employees had to adopt to upskilling in their respective fields. And then focus on insurance. Again, coming back to it, companies which didn't have an insurance policy or organizations which didn't have an insurance policy, they started realizing the importance of insurance and started taking insurance on behalf of their employees. And then other ancillary benefits, that is healthcare cost of the companies, testing for COVID during that period, and then helping out employees in case they were diagnosed with COVID. That ancillary benefits also started, the employees started feeling that. The way forward, that is how the future might be because of the way changes have taken place over the last 2 years. One is the hybrid model of working and employee mobility. That is, if a company has presence all over India, if an employee is saying, I'm working out of Coimbatore, tomorrow the company opens a branch in Delhi or in Calcutta, if that employee wants, the company will have to accommodate to work, allow him to work from there. Because again, if it is a hybrid model of working, the output only matters and not from where he is working. And then invest in digital infrastructure. Again, all companies started moving to cloud. That is, since you are working from anywhere, you need to have a movement in digital infrastructure also. And then leveraging tech to access key employee metrics. That is, again, since people are working remotely, if at all they are working remotely effectively or not, companies have started investing in technology again to assess how the employees perform. And then contract-based work. This is one of the few things which, again, outcome of the pandemic is contract-based work started increasing a lot. Because of, if you are having on a full-time basis, the costs are higher, companies started resorting to contract-based. This is again new to India, but it is prevalent in the West. Location-based compensation structure. That is, if an employee, if an organization offers an employee a position out of Chennai or Bangalore, the cost might be 100 rupees. But then if the same position is being offered in a tier 2 or a tier 3 city, if an employee is working remotely and he says, I'm offering you the same price, the cost would be lesser than what is being offered in Chennai or in Bangalore. Because the inflationary cost or the city inflationary costs which are there, that is not equivalent in both the cities. So you might see people actually moving to tier 2 cities at a lower salary. Once they go back to the bigger city, their salary is again restructured. This is yet to take off in India, but it is very much prevalent in the West and in the Europe. And then employer branding and total rewards. That is, employer branding is off late. You would have seen in social media platforms, companies started advertising themselves of the benefits which they provide. Earlier, they used to advertise only if the job opening was there, but then now you will see employer branding has taken perspective. That is, people start wearing not only Swiggy and Zomato t-shirts, the company t-shirts also people start wearing outside. And then what benefits the company offers. You might see testimonials from, like how you do a testimonial for your college saying this college offers these and all facilities. Similarly, employer have also started using that branding. And then reward recognition. That is not only salary, stock options plans. That is, some companies have even started investing in giving employees stock option plans to make them feel part of the company. That is, they get shares of the company if they are with the company for a particular period. And then efficient workspaces. That is, since companies have started reimagining their day-to-day ops or on their working, how they operationally work, the workspaces have been reimagined, and it is no longer like anybody can come at any point of time. They need to inform and come to the company if they are coming to office or working from home for that day. And then employee well-being is also a measure, non-financial measure. That is, employees have now started becoming choosy. That is, if companies not only seeing other than salary, what are the benefits they are offering, which help them in their physical and mental well-being. That is not only putting money in the hands of the employee, but putting peace of mind or what and all other ancillary benefits, like whether they're providing daycare facilities, whether they're providing upskilling learning, which is for the employees to keep themselves equipped. That is also being done. And then tackling moonlighting. This is a very off late, you would have seen last 2-3 months, this is come into focus, where employees who are working remotely, they start working for 2-3 companies at one point of time. So this has led to companies warning employees, saying that you cannot moonlight us and then get away with it. So this will also have a bigger impact, and considering that this will gain prominence, people have to be more careful. I think with that, this is how the way forward will be, but this slide mainly will be in focus for you students once you go out and get into employment, because don't see only the monetary benefits which you are getting from a company. Please start realizing what other benefits the company is giving, so that you can make a better choice when you attend your placements 2 years or next year from now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the impactful session. Everyone is requested to join for refreshments. Refreshments for industries and faculty delegates are available at the back of the hall. And for the students, it is available outside the hall on the left side. We repeat, refreshments for industry